All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to IGTV. We are a little out of order this morning, but we're delivering the InfraGard Insights with Mark Kappas this morning. He's going to be talking about metrics, those things that you have to report back to management on that you hate putting together, the tables, the compilers, and everything else that you have to report on. So, Mark, why don't you start us off, and we'll transition right over to you.
Sounds good, Joe. Good morning. This morning I'll be talking about metrics and reporting, and quickly getting into it, why are metrics and reporting important? As Robert Heinlein said, if it can't be expressed as figures or numbers, it's not science, it's opinion. So metrics are the measurements that you need to demonstrate some fact. So they're the means by which you can measure and validate the security controls and the systems that you have in place to protect your security are operating and are functioning nominally. And in a lot of ways, they also, over time, and this is where the reporting and the trend analysis come in, they're the means by which you can demonstrate your performance and your achievement of your goals, both in terms of operational and tactical, as well as providing movement towards your strategic goals that your organization probably has. And, we all have to deal with mission statements and other things coming down from the top, but certainly at a more local level within your security organization, you're going to have some medium-term things that you need to be able to demonstrate progress in, and metrics are how you do that. Because they also, the metrics and the reporting is also how you're going to be able to justify, expenditures on, projects, staff, resources, etc. If you have something that tells you you need to do better in a certain area, you can use those metrics to justify upgrades to your systems or other things. And as well as if you deal with regulatory and other compliance issues, as well as just general business policy, metrics are a means by which to measure your compliance with those policies and regulations. So as we're all in, certain dire straits with the economy, and every company and every organization is looking to be as lean and mean as possible, metrics are also can be, a saving grace, because they can show you that you need to spend money and resources on certain things, and they can be used to justify your continued existence in some cases. So it's important to do them and do them well. Three general categories of metrics. Strategic metrics, basically it's a group of metrics. If you start looking at trends and security properties, these aid in decision making, program planning, resource allocation, product and service selection. You have more tactical and operational oversight metrics, and that's the care and feeding of your IT and other security infrastructure systems to make sure that you're in compliance with your requirements and your controls. You're gauging the effectiveness of your controls in some cases, and you're helping manage risks. So they provide, the raw metrics coming out of your tools provide the basis for trend analysis, and can identify specific areas of improvement, and can be indicators of things that are going right or going wrong in your infrastructure. You also have some quality assurance types of metrics, and they're can be used either during the software development lifecycle or the operational lifecycle, to help you eliminate vulnerabilities. Especially if you're doing regressive code production, you can measure your adherence to security code standards. And identify other vulnerabilities that exist and track the other security flaws that are eventually discovered. So when you're designing metrics, we always like to use the SMART principle, and that is make sure the metric is specific, make sure it's measurable, make sure you understand the units of measure that you are using with your metric. It was interesting, one of the DHS videos that Joe was showing earlier showed someone using a medical device, and they said so many units. Well, units of what and how much? You can't just say 10 units. It's got to be 10 milliliters or 10 gallons, and this applies to security as well. So we'll get to that in a couple minutes on the more specific stuff. Make sure that things are attainable. You can attain your metrics, and you can repeat the process, and that metrics have a time dependency to them. So you take the same snapshot every time, and that helps provide, time is a very important context with metrics. You got to take it over the same period of time, at the same time every day, and if you're collecting over long periods to do trends, make sure that the period you're collecting over captures a good sample of whatever data distribution you're studying. With IDS tuning, we spend a lot of time talking about long-term tuning, and it's important to capture all your network traffic to get the proper normal sample of what your network is. And time-based tuning has a lot to do with that. So either you're capturing the entire activity across a month, so you're getting those month-end reports and other odd systems that kick off and do weird traffic, so you can put them into your false positive boxes when they fire. Likewise, with end-year and quarter reporting, they can go longer term if you have a multi-year system. With the design of metrics, there are a couple approaches. You can do top-down or bottom-up, and depending upon what you're trying to accomplish at that moment, you'll very quickly choose one or the other. Top-down, basically, you identify your business or strategic goals, you identify the metrics required to measure progress with those goals, and then you determine the exact measurements, parameters, and methods for gathering those metrics. Bottom-up is more if you have a group of systems that generate alerts or other things that generate logs, you identify the measurements that you can capture or are capturing for a certain process or solution or technical infrastructure. You can determine then the metrics that can be garnered from those measurements, and then try to make a relationship that those metrics have to a strategic goal or policy, and then tweak the parameters to make sure that the metrics apply appropriately to the context. Some other things to consider: make sure the metrics have a context that makes sense outside the system they're being collected, and that multiple units of measurement are used to provide that context. As I talked a minute ago about the syringe measurements being not just units, but either milliliters or gallons or whatever. You can have a system that says, okay, well, one organization might say, well, we found 120 viruses out of our virus detection system. A better metric would be, well, we found 120 viruses in a month out of that virus system. And an even better metric would be, we found 120 viruses in a month across 25 Windows servers. So the more specificity and the more context that you have allows you to understand what you're actually measuring and compare that to other metrics that you're garnering in different places. Don't use metrics that answer questions that nobody's asking. Make sure that they pass the so what test. If you're collecting a metric and you're trying to apply it to a goal, make sure it's applying to a goal or applying to a real system. We all have to do administrivia for our organizations, and we get caught up in what we think is busy work. But as security professionals, make sure that you're measuring things that have real concrete meaning, either your policies, your goals, or indicate what your security posture is, and try to eliminate the rest. Make sure the metrics are easy to capture. Make sure they're easy to store and produce, and make sure your reporting process is manageable. Again, a lot of times, especially with regulatory requirements, why are we struggling so much with regulations? Because complying with them is a real bear, and it requires resources and time and a lot of effort to comply. So to the degree that you can, use automation. Try to make sure that, when you're asked to provide metrics, try to generate them in a manner that is easy for you to do and knock out and automate. And again, once you're trying to do that, keep your eyes on how much resources are going, because if you're spending too much time trying to gather and produce reports, the value of those things is diminished by the cost sunk into them. Now that you're capturing all these metrics, develop trend analysis. Make sure that you understand where the trends in all these metrics are going, and take a look at the reports and try to develop an understanding of leading versus lagging indicators. Sometimes there may be some things that you might see some spike in traffic, and that's an indication of something going wrong. So develop correlations when you're doing trend analysis between your different systems. And finally, as you develop these reports and the other things, develop, the format and the dissemination mechanisms for reports. Remember, we do business need to know and least privilege. So if you need to do reports to the general business management, there may be things that they don't need to know or need to see in the reports. So make sure that it's easy produced, easy to be stored, and the right people are getting the right information. And again, automation is a huge help and resource with these things. I'll have some other information on metrics gathering and production, both from SANS, NIST, and ISACA, and they'll be up in the chat very shortly. Joe, that's metrics in a nutshell.
That's actually a terrific overview, and quite frankly, I don't know how you guys do it. Between you and Bill, both of you seem to hit the ball right out of the park every week on topics that, quite frankly, could go on in quite some length. But you know, it is kind of cool though what you're talking about. You know, this, you know, when we're talking about metrics, you know, if you know, it's something that we used to say when I worked in city government. If you're not counting it, all right, then you just really don't know what's going on. All right, and that's the only way you can tell the performance and the measurement of whether it's a system or whether it's a process or whether it's you know, just counting widgets. You know, if you're not counting them, then what do you know? You don't know if they're lost, if they're gone, or where they are. So, you know, it's a big deal.
And as you get into the more advanced, you know, we talk about advanced persistent threats and some of these really important, you know, high-level intelligence security issues. If you're not doing, and this is one of those basics, if you're not doing metrics right, you're flying blind. And like I opened with the Heinlein quote that said, if you can't express it as numbers, it's not fact, it's opinion. And so in order to develop these strategies and the intelligence to cope with these advanced threats, you need to understand how your environment is operating. And the only way to do that is measuring it and taking its temperature.
Well, I'm in absolute agreement with you, and that's one of the reasons, you know, in the beauty of the crime fighting days, we used to do, you know, crime fighting with acetates and grease pencils, you know, and you know, that was the beginning, all right, and then we went to mapping, and then all of a sudden, you know, precinct commanders knew what was going on, and all of a sudden, platoon commanders knew what was going on, and all of a sudden, a squad sergeant said, "Holy nonsense! I gotta know." So
it's funny to track that sort of information revolution quickly. You know, the movie Serpico was on the other day, and
yes, it was. I saw it.
Part of his career is when he gets, you know, moved into the fingerprinting department. You think about, you know, 30 years ago, these guys are playing with, you know, fingerprint cards and taking measurements, and now we have optical recognition systems that can scan the fingerprints in and manage that data in a way that has meaning and can be disseminated to not only the guys on the street who may be looking for somebody, but back into the leadership to understand, you know, how these threats go, and you can correlate stuff in ways that just you couldn't even imagine even 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think the value of the auditor report is really something that you know, people have not seen full value of, because it really can tell you what's going on inside of your organization, your division, you know, your business unit, whatever it is. And you know, it's a good talk. You know, it's unfortunate. I think a lot of people are kind of avoiding it.
Well, I think the problem is you've got a lot of bad metrics along with the good metrics, and you know, the leadership doesn't always make the case for what they're gathering and why, and then it seems to the guys in the trench as busy work. And until they can understand what the strategic value of collecting that information, and if it's not easy to collect, and that's why I stress, you have to make sure that you collect your metrics in a manageable, rapid fashion. And I think a lot of organizations, you know, saw that they could collect all this information and said, oh, we got to get that. And they haven't really actually done anything with it or demonstrate that they're doing anything with it. And that kind of, you know, makes it difficult to find those needles in a haystack.
Yeah, I know. I agree. In the city, they used to collect telephone books full of data and information, but it didn't really serve the purpose because there was no priority in programs and things of that nature. Well, you know, when I was in there with the Giuliani administration, we did performance measurement, and a lot of the city agencies were, what are you talking about? You know, well, here we go. All right, if we're dumping X amount of dollars into a particular area, all right, you've got to perform, and we've got to see whether this is worthwhile or not. So that's where it becomes very real, very, very quick. And I'm sure with private companies, whether you're IT focused or otherwise, you know, it's equally as important.
Especially these days.
Yep. All right, Mark. Good call. Talk to you next week. Bye.
Have a good one, Joe. Thanks.
Right. Bye.